You are really going to enjoy this episode of the Intentional Clinician podcast with Paul Krauss. We have, returning to the podcast, artist, visual artist, philosopher, and man living in a van long-term, Jef Caine. If you are interested in VanLife, art, making your living as an artist, deconstruction of religion, existentialist philosophy, and questioning everything, then this is the podcast for you. Jef Caine picked out the music for this podcast, most of it by Mount Erie, one of our favorite artists we share in common. I also added a few other Mount Erie songs that I liked, as well as a few songs by the band Lake, also from the Pacific Northwest, this time from some sort of island outside of the Puget Sound, where Mount Erie is from Anacortes, Washington. All right, hope you enjoy this conversation with Jef Caine. We are here at the studio.
We're here, yeah. Welcome to my office.
All right, Jef Caine, what studio are we at?
Yeah, we're at the Co-Hoots co-working space in Midtown, Phoenix, Arizona.
Okay, and with this suite, you have come in here to co-work with people doing your art and other things. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing here?
Yeah, for sure. Yep. So I'm a freelance illustrator, graphic designer, content creator. So I'm currently living out of my van for the past year and a half or so. And so I used to work out of my spare bedroom in my apartment, that sort of thing. And more recently, I've started living out of my vehicle. So yeah, that's why I've been utilizing this co-working space, and I create content for them as well in exchange for use of the space.
Excellent. I'm going to make sure I have all of Jeff's art links in the show notes so you can buy a t-shirt, stickers, come to one of his live art performances where he draws your photo live inside a photo booth or a cartoon booth. And, there's a sticker right here. It is a nose with eyes on it. I'll have to show this somewhere in the show notes. I've just scored this. So I want to make sure we talk about that, your art, this is something you're doing, but one of the bigger topics I wanted to jump into is that you said you used to live in an apartment.
Right.
And you used to work out of that apartment and make art and graphic design and videos. What else do you make?
Yeah, I guess that's it.
Social media.
Social media stuff.
People's media, make videos, things like that
social media content. Yeah.
Okay. And you used to do that all out of an apartment, and then somewhere around a year ago, when I met you before that, but it was somewhere over a year ago that you started living not in an apartment. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, for sure. It's about a year and a half now. So I was married at the time when we met.
That's right, yes.
And my now ex-wife and I got divorced, and so that's obviously a long personal story there, but so that's why I decided to live out of a van, because we were living together in an apartment, and when we separated, I decided to try out the whole van life thing rather than just getting my own apartment or finding some other living arrangements.
Okay, so this sounds like quite a transition in my mind from living in a building that hopefully doesn't move,
right,
to something that could have a flat tire. Perhaps people might come up to the van, they're curious about the contents or what's going on in there.
Sure, yeah.
Tell me about that transition. Was it purely economic, or was it more just adventure, or what was
it? It was a little of both, for sure. Van life was something that I was always sort of interested in, curious about, kind of always wanted to try. So there definitely was just an element of adventure, and also just it seemed like such a like perfect opportunity in the sense of I was like kind of starting fresh, like opportunity to just kind of get rid of all my stuff and like not buy new stuff, just try to go minimal and stay minimal as much as possible. And yeah, absolutely the economics of it is a huge factor as well, because as a freelancer, I have very inconsistent income. It's sort of a classic feast or famine thing where sometimes I have a lot of paying work coming in and sometimes not so much, and that can be very stressful. And once again, when I was married in a relationship, my partner had more consistent income, so we were able to make that work together. But when I'm on my own, it's a little bit less sustainable.
Yeah, that makes sense. And if you went and got a 9-to-5 job, then you probably wouldn't have as much time for this art and creating freelance stuff. Am I right about that?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's only so many hours in the day, hypothetically.
Well, because then you might be making, so that makes sense. So you decided, okay, VanLife. And I do remember that. I remember you selling and then giving away pretty much like a lot of things I saw on the internet at the time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I said, VanLife was one thing that I was interested in, curious about for the longest time. Minimalism, I suppose, was another thing that I was very compelled by and convicted about, and I felt like I really struggled with like saying I want to be a minimalist. I want to just like not own all of this junk. But then when it came time to like sort through and get rid of my stuff, just struggling to actually get rid of it. And then I came to this point in my life where, just my whole life is falling apart anyway. Like what difference does it make whether or not I keep my books and clothes and, random stuff like that I don't need. There's that. And then of course, just like within the divorce, kind of the classic situation within a divorce is like, we're fighting about who gets to keep the couch and the furniture and the car and that sort of thing. And so that made it easy from a logistical standpoint of I was just, you can keep all the stuff because I'm just trying to sort of get rid of everything.
The sound of my feet on the sidewalk. That was me treasure hunting. I would bury what I found. That was me gold digger underground. Quickly forgotten was that forgetful way of life. When I left home and I lived as if I'd died, sitting on a rock and doing nothing, alone for so long. In the dark I found my sight, and there your name was, written large in letters bright. There my faith was.
So basically there was multiple layers. What I'm sensing is it wasn't just, it was like VanLife minimalism for sure, but then there was also an element of I'm basically burning down my entire life of what I've known since you've been married. For how long were you married?
11 years.
Oh my, okay, that was longer than I thought. So 11 years, I've got a quote I'm bringing up here. Okay. 11 years of marriage, that's a long time. Did you know the person before you got married?
Yeah, we dated for about 2 years.
So that's 13 years of your life being in a similar sort of pattern.
Right.
And then all of a sudden you're going through the divorce, which is a big change for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And with that, I think you also kind of alluded to like, well, I might as well just get rid of everything and go for it. Is that part of existential thing as well?
Existential thing?
I don't know, like a move?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I mean, again, just like in terms of just, I mean, as far as like the emotional aspect, like I guess struggled with the emotional aspect of getting rid of stuff before all of this, but within the context of getting divorced, like I was so like sad and heartbroken about the loss of this relationship that it seemed like the idea of like getting rid of my stuff was just nothing compared to that. So it just seemed like just an opportunity to kind of lump it all together, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's kind of like an opportunity that presents itself because the relationship was over. Mm-hmm. You would struggle getting rid of stuff, but here it all goes at once. And then also, instead of getting a different type of job, I'm going to stay freelance.
Right.
Easiest way not to be stressed out is not have overhead.
Exactly. Yes.
People who are not in the business world. And if you're in a W-2 situation, overhead is the rent and supplies and help to be able to do the job you need to do. So, for instance, if you work at a Starbucks or something like that, I'm afraid to say that. Okay, if you work at a corporate coffee shop, I didn't say Starbucks.
Sure.
They are renting a building.
Right.
They're bought a bunch of equipment, and then they're buying you a uniform or whatever they buy.
Sure.
And subscribing to Starbucks network, and that's the overhead that the business is paying. And their whole idea is to sell products at such a price that they not only pay for the overhead, they pay for all of your labor, and then they have a bunch left over for themselves. And that's called the profit.
Yeah.
So, but if you're self-employed, it's very dangerous because you're the only one making money, and then you have to somehow rent an office or have certain supplies or whatever. Every month you have to pay that payment whether or not you have work or not.
Exactly.
And as a freelancer, it's even more scant because it could be, what if you have a big sweet job come in, but then 5 months you get all these little jobs or no jobs?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
what happens then?
Exactly. Yeah, economic insecurity,
Right, sounds stressful.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
So I was just kind of putting that out there for the folks out there because this is a philosophy, psychology, counseling type self-improvement channel. Not everyone's into business, but it can be quite stressful to make that investment to have overhead. Mm-hmm. So then your overhead really, if you're freelance and living in a van, is basically kind of like your van and your life.
Yeah, exactly. Of course it's not free. It's
Right.
You still have car insurance, gas, maintenance on the vehicle, of course, like other just inconveniences, like because I don't have my own shower in there. I have a gym membership, so I shower at the gym. What are other examples? But yeah, I guess so again, it's not free. There are expenses associated with living in a van, but there's no rent because the vehicle is completely paid off. I don't have a car payment or anything, so it's just the only expense I have is just whatever it takes to keep the vehicle running. And of course, a lot of people who live in an apartment or in a house and pay a mortgage also have a car payment or car insurance, those types of expenses as well. So yeah, it's very nice. It's a huge relief to get to sort of avoid that huge expense that most people have to deal with.
Well, and the thing that's always struck with me is when you say expense, in my mind, you're not just talking about money.
Sure,
you're talking about time,
convenience. Absolutely.
I don't know how long it takes to clean a van versus cleaning a whole house. That seems like quite a time difference. What are your thoughts, having lived in both?
That's true. That's a good point. I guess that's another thing that sort of appeals to me about minimalism is just the idea of sort of the cleanliness, the simplicity, the idea that like in theory I can spend less time like just managing all of my junk and more time just either like working or pursuing like creative pursuits that don't pay a lot of money or just doing whatever I want to do with my time. Yeah.
Yeah, like seeing friends, making friends, traveling, because I do know that you've traveled quite a bit in the last year. When you weren't in Phoenix, you were all over the map.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like, again, the way that I've approached VanLife, or just the way that it's sort of fallen together for me so far, has been a little bit different than sort of the stereotypical, or what you think of with VanLife is just like traveling constantly and just like working out of a different coffee shop in a different part of America every weekend, which seems really cool. I feel like I've done a little bit of that, but also I've just had sort of like work connections and opportunities here in Phoenix. And if you're familiar with the climate in Phoenix, it's famously very, very hot in the summer, but it's very nice and cool for the winter season. So it's sort of perfect for that, for me to be just hanging out in my van, sleeping there at night when it's nice and cool after the sun goes down. And then in the summertime is when I tend to do more traveling to get out of the the desert heat.
Yeah, I can't imagine it'd be very easy to sleep when the weather is 100 degrees at night.
Yeah, it's not fun. I did a little bit of it because I started a little bit too soon. As I came back to Phoenix in like September or so last year when I first started this, and yeah, it was still sort of in the hundreds and still a little bit uncomfortable.
Oh, yikes. Okay.
The generous world suggests generous living, so we lay under low wide branches of the oldest tree on the dune in the hay, where we will stay for so long that the careful birds will relax and make black nests in your black hair and walk around beneath my stale feet, and we will only notice the play of the world for a moment and let it roll on the way the world rolls on. We will only notice the world for a moment and let it roll on. The world for a moment and let it roll on the way the world rolls on through open gates.
Trying to get into, I think I want to jump into a little bit of your philosophy, and then we'll get back into the brass tacks about how this works and
Sure.
how maybe other people could be inspired and they can see all the cool art you've created and things you've done. Because I want to talk about what you've done too. But
Yeah.
there's this quote that jumped out at me the other day.
Okay.
It's by Georgia O'Keeffe. She said this. She's a famous painter and artist. I decided to start anew, to strip away what I had been taught. And when I was thinking about you and your journey, I thought about that quote. Any comments on that? I decided to start anew, to strip away what I had been taught. Not that you've been taught to live in a house or have a 9-to-5, but I don't know what your thoughts were about that.
It resonates for sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you might say that I've become a little bit disenfranchised or disillusioned with sort of the American dream, or the thought of like, starting a family, having a house, a career, 2.5 kids, that whole thing. I feel like, I never wanted kids, honestly, but yeah, I mean, just the whole concept of getting married and starting a family was something that I had very much bought into at a very young age, right out of Bible college. I'm sure we talked about that last time that I went to Bible college. I was a very conservative, very, very committed Christian, basically like bought into the idea that like the purpose of life is to serve God, preach the gospel to all people, to work in ministry. And I was very committed to that. And that's sort of like what I saw my purpose in life being. And then, of course, like getting married young was also sort of a, how to say this? Like it's a huge aspect of Christian culture that I'm sure people who have been around Christian culture are familiar with this phenomenon, and it's something that I was totally bought into as well. And I sort of went through that whole religious deconstruction, deconversion process a couple years ago. With still married and everything, and that sort of was so that was a huge stripping away for me for sure. Just the whole stripping away of what I believed, what I thought about like the purpose, the meaning of life was, all of those things, the purpose of like me, myself, and what I should be doing with my life, my career, my marriage, that whole thing. And that became a real struggle as well with when but my ex-wife and I both sort of lost our faith like at different times for different reasons. And then, we were sort of left to make sense of, well, this is a big part of the reason we got married. We got married super young for this reason of feeling like we need to like jump into ministry, and like we were planning on like traveling and being missionaries and all that sort of thing. And I don't know. Yeah, it's a strange thing because there was a season where I kind of thought like, okay, we've both lost our faith and we're both figuring out sort of our identities and what we're about in a different way, but that doesn't mean we can't be together, because of course there's plenty of couples who do go through a loss of faith and still stay together in the end. Unfortunately that was not the case with our relationship.
Oh, wow. So that's a lot of change that
Yeah.
happened all at once, or within a couple of years, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
I remember, just for people who might be more interested in Jeff's deconstruction journey, we did that on episodes 107,
Okay.
May of 2023.
Yeah.
I didn't realize it had been that long. 2.5 hours we talked that day
wow.
about Christianity and spirituality and theology and alternative theologies and mainstream theologies and all sorts of interesting things about that journey and my journey as well, and that my deconstruction journey, which started quite at a young age, somewhere in my early pre-teens, but not really outward until I was 16. But anyway, this isn't about me, but it does talk about how you and I got together.
Yeah, absolutely.
I wanted to point that out for folks who are interested in that piece of it. But if you grow up and you're told your purpose is to get out there and spread the gospel to anyone who will listen, and you also need a mate, so hurry up and marry immediately. So I'm assuming this was like 18, 19? What were you?
Yeah, I was 21.
21. So
yeah.
pretty low, pretty young.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden, you both lose your faith, and that intersects with identity, especially in most of the evangelical. Am I saying that right? Is that
evangelical? Yeah, for
evangelical Protestants. They are very much linking their identity with their spirituality. Where certain sects of Christianity or other religions, you might be like that. Just might be like part of you, but it's not like your main identity. And I think it sounds like with Bible college and ministry, it sounds like that was a huge part of the identity.
Yeah.
And then you guys got together, but then if you're trying to figure out what your new identity is, yikes, you might have different ideas of what your identity needs to be or wants to be and what you want to do with that. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I feel like that was, because of course that was such a big reason that we decided to get married when we did, was just like that, I don't know, that social obligation, that thought of like, well, what are we going to do? We can't live together. The idea of like cohabitating or like having like a sexual relationship without being married first was just not an option, in terms of just our worldviews at the time. And that was something that, I don't know, for me anyway, I thought about that all the time of like, what would have happened if we didn't have that obligation at that point in life, if we, because if we still met and fell in love and wanted to date each other for a long-term relationship, where would we be now? Like, would we still be together? Would we have broken up sooner because we wouldn't have that obligation to stay married because we made the marriage commitments, that sort of thing? Yeah, I've spent many many nights pondering these things, for sure.
Wow, yeah, and it's such a big part of your life and childhood, and I, as a therapist and somebody who's interested in psychology, I would say social programming. We're all socially programmed by various sources, but for instance, for my friends who weren't raised religious, it was kind of like running through a neighborhood with some sprinklers on. You get a little wet, but you can kind of figure out which yard you want to hang out in.
Sure.
But if you're kind of in a very devoted religion, so to speak, it's kind of like, don't leave the yard. And also, this sprinkler is going to get you real wet, and you got to make sure you like this wetness and stay here. I know it's the weirdest metaphor I've ever made, but I think about that. It's not like you weren't exposed to other things, but you were told that this is the yard you got to play in, and this is why, and those other yards may not be as good, or they may be the wrong yard.
Yeah.
Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess, like, just to clarify a little bit more, I feel like that's also something I've been really working through and trying to sort of reshape the narrative a little bit, or take more accountability on my own part, perhaps, because I do feel like it's really easy for me to sort of blame it all on Bible college or blame it all on my Christian upbringing. Like, I did a moth story slam thing like a year ago, where I shared that a clip of that on social media, and where I'm talking about, like, I'm 33 years old and divorced after being married for 11 years. I'm like, how is that possible for me to be this young and to have been married that long? Bible college, and kind of use that as a cheap punchline that's sort of like, it's funny because people who are familiar with Bible college, they kind of get it. They get that whole cultural thing. All that to say, I'm trying to take a little bit more personal responsibility and have a little bit more of a nuanced view of, like, well, yes, there were social pressures or social programming. That's a good term for it. It still like was my decision. I was still an adult, knew what I was doing. So just all that to say, I can't blame all of my problems on Bible college and Christianity.
Oh, yeah, I think that is a very well-rounded viewpoint. We're all programmed by something.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And we could all say the grass is greener, and like I said, like the friends are raised with religion, but some of them are like, gosh, I kind of wish I was locked in a yard and it was a little safer until I got older, right? I mean, there's always another way to look at it. So I like that you're sort of taking some responsibility. Okay, yeah, I was raised in this, but I went, I went right into it and at 18 and thought this was the thing, and I just kept going with it. And I did make those choices.
Right.
Some would say you've been, wholly influenced, but you're right. There was probably kids who were raised in their religion and decided, screw this, I'm going to go on tour with a death metal punk band that worships Satan. You know what I mean? Yeah. I've met a few.
Right.
So there is that, right? So you did, but like, I guess what I was trying to say is the investment's so big that the unravelment is so long. That's what I was thinking. Like, my deconstruction started at like 11 or 10 when I was like, I don't believe in hell. Does that mean I believe in heaven? Right?
Sure. Yeah.
And I also didn't believe God was a man. I thought Jesus was a man because duh. But like, I didn't think that God, the entity, which was very controversial in the 90s in a smaller city. So anyway, those sort of things, that was a long unraveling. I would say it's still unraveling, but you were like kind of tight. You were tightly wound into the culture. And so then taking yourself out, it's a lot to unwind. And I love it. I love that you kind of also just turned your whole life into kind of unwinding in a way.
Yeah.
When you were like, unwinding, you might as well just keep going.
Sure. That's a good way to put it. Yeah, I do feel still unsettled. I don't know, still like don't really know like who I am, what I'm doing, what my purpose is, which also, I mean, of course, I've had the thought of like maybe that's the whole thing is there is no purpose and you just need to choose a purpose for yourself. All of that sort of thing. But yeah, I do feel like I'm still unwinding, unraveling in the sense that I still sort of have these hang-ups or these like questions or this I don't know, like maybe this resentment or this thought of like, why did I take so much longer to realize that God doesn't exist than the people who'd figured out when they were 15, and sort of being envious of those people and thinking about how like at the time I sort of looked down on those people or like felt bad for them or was praying for them, and like now I think like shoot, they were the ones who had it right, and I should have gone along with them 10 years, 15 years earlier.
Well, it's, maybe so, but I do think if I can posit here, and we'll go back to the van in a minute, but like, if you would have done that, wouldn't you have faced intense social reprisals for joining the atheist kids?
Sure, yeah. If I would have become an atheist while I was still like in youth group or that kind of thing.
Yes, that's right. When you were that age, yeah.
Well, that's true. I guess it depends, because I think a lot of people, a lot of my friends and peers in youth group like would just sort of have a faith, or they would show up to church events and stuff, and from my like judgmental, serious Christian perspective, it wasn't truly their faith. They weren't serious enough about it. And then like I would go to Bible college and my friends would go to state school and start like drinking and partying and, you know, going with the ways of the world. And again, like me from my like very judgmental, conservative Christian perspective at the time would again just like feel bad for them and feel like, well, like I guess that goes to show it was never truly their faith. Just all that to say, I feel like there's a way to like be not be like a hardcore atheist, but be just like a whatever, like not serious Christian when you're a teenager, and go and but yeah, to answer your question in another way, yeah, if I were to become like a hardcore, like annoying Reddit atheist who was always like pointing out all the logical reasons that God doesn't exist when I was like 15 in youth group, like. Yeah, I'm not sure how my family would respond, but they wouldn't be happy about it. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like, there's a lot of us, you know, when you're a little kid, you want to please your parents, and that's partly a survival technique.
Sure.
Because they're the ones feeding you, and they're the ones that the state, at least in the United States, until 18, they're in charge of you legally.
Yeah.
So there is some, you know, people-pleasing stuff within us to survive.
Of all the wrecked up things I haul with me around. I heard singing at twilight, trailed by belongings. I crawled forward into a clearing dust. Got a huge fire going. It grew, night fell, and I kept throwing whatever I could pick up into the flames.
So, you know, we've gone really hardcore in the philosophy. Minimalism, existential stuff, deconstruction of religion, we went heavy into that. So tell me a little bit about the minimalism. Why did that appeal to you?
Yeah. Okay. Well, that is interesting because I feel like that that kind of ties into the Christianity as well.
Oh, it does. Okay.
Yeah.
Tell me more. I want to know about that.
Well, because I remember like being a kid and like just trying to read the Bible for myself, right? And like so reading the Gospels and how Jesus is constantly telling people to sell all their possessions, give it to the poor, just sort of walk the earth and just like kind of like be a homeless hippie traveler type. It seems like that's the life that Jesus led and his disciples. And I don't know, it was so sort of frustrating for me because I would like point this out to people and be like, what's the deal? Like, you know, of course, like I was bothered by sort of the wealth and excess of Christianity within like mega churches or certain circles of Christianity, and it seems like this seems so anti-Jesus' message. Jesus seemed like to be really pumped up about living more of an ascetic life and this idea that don't store up treasures on earth where moth destroys and thieves break in and steal, store up treasures in heaven. So like, yeah, even now to me, like that still has like a very potent meaning for me, even though I don't like believe God exists. I still think that's like a very profound, kind of counterintuitive, like interesting message that's true in a lot of ways. So again, like I was always sort of like convicted by that, by the fact that I was living this comfortable middle class lifestyle. Like another part of my story is that I worked as a graphic designer for many years at a mega church, and I felt sort of, again, I felt conflicted about that because on one hand, like I loved it because it was a really fun, like kind of cushy corporate job where I got to just like show up and be on Photoshop all day and just mess around and get paid for it and get free coffee and whatever, you know, like on one hand I was just enjoying the perks of the job, and on another hand I was feeling like, yeah, this is not the model of church that I think Jesus had in mind with his preaching. I think he was very like anti-wealth. He was very much like if he stepped his foot in that church, he'd be flipping tables over and saying you should sell all this and give it to the poor, that sort of thing. So I feel like I always sort of had that, I don't know if guilt complex is the right word. Like I sort of felt guilty, like I was betraying my own faith or not being
your
fully
like values of the faith.
Yeah, my values. Yeah. Like I was a little bit like selling out my values for just like the comfort of material goods and that sort of thing. And so I would think about that like while I was working at the church and sort of having all these questions of faith and struggling with it. And that was a thought that occurred to me a lot, was maybe the reason that I am struggling with my faith is because I'm not fully living it out. I'm sort of, again, just sort of compromising my values by taking this cushy church job rather than like being a destitute missionary somewhere or something like that.
Oh, wow. So this minimalism had been around way before you deconstructed.
Yeah. Again, like I really do feel like that's where it came from for me. Like that was my first exposure to minimalism, was just like reading like the words of Jesus, at least according to the authors of the Gospels, was saying like, sell all your possessions, give it to the poor, walk the earth. And again, it's kind of frustrating because whenever I start talking this way to Christians, they're very quick to sort of correct me and say like, no, Jesus doesn't want everyone to be poor. He said that to the rich young ruler, but he didn't say that to everybody. And there's like, he had people like funding him, and that they come up with a lot of excuses. In my opinion, it seems like they're just looking for excuses for why they can keep their like expensive house in the suburbs or whatever. Because to me, I feel like it wasn't just the rich young ruler. I think it was like basically all of the disciples. He told them to like leave their livelihood, and he just instructed that to multiple people saying like, you should not be materialistic.
Well, and the tax collector guy.
Yeah,
he
absolutely.
was telling him to leave his life, and he told all the fishermen to quit fishing and leave their whole family behind to do this work. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, leave family behind, which that was another sort of inconsistency that I thought about a lot within Christian culture. Like, why is Christian culture so big on like getting married and having kids and starting a family, when I feel like the major voices of the New Testament, Jesus and Paul, are both like not family men, and they're very much saying, I mean, Paul especially is saying like, don't get married if you can help it, because having a family is just a distraction from the ministry. And it seems like that was the way Jesus lived his life, was no time for a wife and kids because I gotta walk the earth and do ministry. Yeah, again, it was just something that sort of a cognitive dissonance that I was somewhat aware of in my own mind and sort of bothered by, but also was, sort of just pushing to the side for many years. Yeah, that is a interesting concept, and we talked a lot about in the last podcast about how when you question kind of major cultural tropes within the church, often there was a lot of challenging back or kind of telling you to pipe down. You don't need to be. What are you thinking about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Sort of the cultural, and this is a whole thing we talked about last time: the church versus what the actual teaching said versus which translation versus how do you interpret it.
Yeah,
and you're just like looking at the basic facts. Like, let's see, Paul definitely didn't marry anybody. He went around preaching the whole time, told people not to get married unless they couldn't control themselves,
burned with lust. Yeah, yeah.
And then Jesus is like, running around with a bunch of dudes that like give up their jobs and like making fish and bread out of thin air and helping a bunch of lepers and widows and blind people and hanging out with prostitutes and tax collectors like they're equals. And he's countercultural. Mm-hmm. But yet Christianity in America is been co-opted, or maybe it's just part of the status quo here. And really, in some places, I've even heard it's like a point of pride to be like, we have a 7-bedroom house, and we also have 5 children, and we adopted one too, and which is fine. I'm not against having all these children. That's fine if you want to do your thing. Sure. But if it's like all in the name of the Bible or the church or God or something, and that to me it was like, and which one? What? Where is it saying that? It says that in Genesis, like multiply. That was Genesis. We didn't have any people. Now we got tons of people.
Yeah, absolutely. It certainly is like an Old Testament value. I would say the idea of like having being a patriarch, having a family, so that you have lineage, and that's how God blesses people in the Old Testament, right, is by giving them wealth and family and descendants. And then New Testament, one of the many discrepancies between Old Testament and New Testament God is New Testament God seems to say, like, you should be dirt poor and not have a family. Again, like from my perspective, the way I read the text.
Well, I think you read it literally, and I think the hard part is that in the church, they cherry pick between metaphors. Let's look at this metaphorically, or definitely literal. When
Right.
I'm like, bros, like a lot of your literalism is metaphor, and a lot of the metaphors are literal. Like,
Yeah,
what? Like,
sure.
where did you learn what metaphors and literal? Anyway, but that's a whole nother topic. But the minimalism was in Jesus' teachings that appealed to you, and you had this whole period of time where you were sort of going along with what was expected culturally,
Right.
which was not minimalism.
Right.
It was kind of easy living, whatever. You know, mega churches have usually mega money, to pay a staff to make entertaining services and church services and coffee shops and what else? Christian rock bands or what?
Yeah, just like programming, events,
Programming.
programming. Yeah, that's a good church word for you. Yeah, and again, like that was something that I really struggled with because of it was sort of like my like two passions, you know, at least at the time, were like my Christian faith and creativity. You know, just I've always like enjoyed drawing and art and just wanted to do something like visually creative with my life, and studied graphic design in Bible college, and so in some ways like getting a job as a graphic designer at a mega church was just like perfect dream job. In a lot of ways I really loved it, really enjoyed it, because it felt like this is fulfilling both of these passions, and on the other hand, because of all the sort of crisis of values that I already described, I felt super conflicted about it. Like just in terms of having a graphic design job like that, on one hand was really great, was very grateful for it. But on the other hand, I felt like it doesn't really make sense that a church should have its own in-house creative department, and it shouldn't have the budget to pay a full-time graphic designer with benefits and salary and 401k and all of that, because it should be using those funds to give to the poor or whatever. But also, like, I'm very grateful to be benefiting from those funds that they're giving to me. Yeah, that's how I felt conflicted. What's that quote of it's very difficult for someone to understand a concept when his salary depends on him not understanding it?
Oh, yeah.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know the quote. I don't know who said it.
I can't remember who said it, yeah.
It makes sense. And in the United States, we've become more and more hyper in money is tied into almost so many more things. The only thing there's very few things that aren't tied into it. Like, for instance, we think of public parks and libraries, but those are funded by tax money.
Exactly.
So it's like
right.
Everything is interconnected with money in some way. And I'm not saying things weren't before, but if you look back in time, even 100 years ago, I mean, there was a little bit less tie to that.
Yeah.
And now it's difficult to live outside that system. In fact, one could posit that you are punished for living outside that system by the society through various mechanisms, mostly monetary, but also judicial in nature. I don't know if you have run into that, because now you are a minimalist. You got rid of your house,
Right.
get rid of all your furniture,
Right.
get rid of like pretty much anything that doesn't fit in a van.
Right.
And so that means that you also have to like cook meals here at the co-working center, right? Or someone's house.
Right.
And-
yeah. Or just on my little camp stove, like in the park, or when I'm camping, or that sort of thing. Right. Exactly.
Right, then the camp stove, and I know that they permit those in parks, and your van is perfectly welcome in all parks, but I could imagine there are some city laws that might get into your business a little bit about cooking outside and whatnot. I'm not sure if you run into that.
For sure, yeah. When you were saying it might be punished judicially, I don't want to paint myself as a victim here or anything, but yeah, that is something for sure I've become a little bit more aware of and conscious of. Is people talk about the sort of the concept of outlawing homelessness. I guess like for me, when it comes to like finding a place to park my van at night, I've sort of like found a handful of spaces and like friends who let me park in their driveway and that sort of thing, but. Yeah, for sure. Certainly, I've become much more aware of which types of places are going to have signs that say, "Oh, no overnight parking." And like, for example, a park is a great example of like a public space that I get to enjoy that space because of taxpayers, which I'm very grateful for. And a park, typically will have a parking lot, but they'll have signs posted everywhere that say no overnight parking because of people like me. So then I become aware that, okay, I can't get caught sleeping in my van overnight in the parking lot, but usually if I'm parked on the street next to the park, then I'm okay, because it's just sort of like general street parking, like in a neighborhood or something, but it's not like next to someone's house, so I'm not going to bother some random person by having a stranger parked outside their home. Yeah. So I don't know if that answers your
Okay.
question.
Yeah, no, that does. Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things where you could be sort of, I don't know, I want to say prosecuted. It's a little bit more persecuted because honestly, I don't think unless you actually like go out of your way to really do a big crime that the city would really spend their money on prosecuting somebody who doesn't have a house unless they did something else. But
Right, exactly. Yeah. And I mean, yeah, just to be clear, I've never gotten like fined or anything. I've gotten the knock on the window a handful of times over the past year and a half where I'm parked someplace where I think it's okay to sleep for the night, and then a cop knocks on the window and says, "Hey, you can't park here. You got to move." Again, like most of those times, he probably could have given me a ticket, but he always just lets me off with a warning or just saying like, "Yeah, you can't park here. You got to go find some other place to sleep." Yeah. So again, no complaints. Really grateful for that most of them seem generally sympathetic towards me. I'm sure they deal with a lot of people who are just like sleeping on park benches and that sort of thing. So
right, sleeping on someone else's property, and technically the car is your van is your property, and the streets are public.
Right.
But if somebody complains, they're gonna. I don't know if it's an actual violation because I don't think we don't have. I don't know about Phoenix. I don't think we have park sleeping in your car rules. I know parts of Los Angeles, Seattle. I don't know about Portland, but I know for certain parts of Seattle and San Francisco or in LA have ordinances against it.
Right.
Not the whole city itself, because some residents felt it was unfair that people were just like parked outside their house or whatever. And, and to be fair, your van is very inconspicuous. I have you can't tell someone is living in there.
Right. Yeah, it's a minivan.
It's a minivan, right.
So it's like it has some advantages to it that, like you said, it's more inconspicuous. It doesn't. Yeah, if it's like a Sprinter van, obviously that looks a little bit more like the type of VanLife van that people live out of that you're picturing. So it's a minivan, more inconspicuous. Also, just like it's smaller, so it's just more maneuverable or easier to drive or easier to park in certain places. The disadvantage, of course, is that it's a smaller space. So I can't stand up in there. There's less room to move around in there. So generally, I sort of just sleep in it at night and spend most of my time outside the van, like either outdoors or like in public places like coffee shops or this workspace or libraries or that sort of thing.
Okay, excellent. So in a way, you are utilizing the city's facilities in a respectful, calm way, and therefore you basically haven't had any trouble at all.
Right.
Because in your situation, you are living in a van or quote unquote houseless by choice, where
Houseless
a lot of
by
people
choice,
are not houseless by choice.
Right. And
then that runs into very big stress mechanisms. And when you're really stressed, whether it's a chicken or the egg, often people go to drugs or alcohol or different, trying to make money quickly because they don't know how to, get back in a house, or it's very stressful if you don't choose to be living in a house, which can lead to some of the troubles we see with the homeless folks having difficulties in their lives, various difficulties. But we've seen, when people have a space, whether it be a homeless person through a program getting into one of those programs where it's called Housing First, we see massive, positive turnarounds in their life, which means I think they feel safe enough to relax. And in your case, you chose this, and you feel, I'm assuming you feel relaxed enough to sleep at night.
Yeah, for sure.
And you have welcoming spaces. So.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something that just over the past year and a half I've just gained a little bit of skills in. One, just like finding the types of places that it seems like it's safe to park and I'm not going to be bothering anyone or / get bothered myself. That, and just also just being a little bit more comfortable with it, for sure. Like when I first started, I was just a little bit more paranoid about, oh shoot, can I park here? Every time a car would drive by, is that a cop? Is he gonna come bother me? That sort of thing. So also just sort of being desensitized to it a little bit.
I had my hopes of how I would be after living in exile, after closing your eyes to me. I even wrote scenes where I Eskimo eyes. New baby on my back, but from where? But I didn't count the fact that I have ghosts in my mind, stowaways, great ghosts of my life, great ghosts of old wives, and they're howling. So I've spent my wilderness time rolling on the ground, pulling my hair and wrestling them off, yelling at no one, punching snow. I gathered ghosts and I gave them my lecture. I bid them away, I pleaded and cried. I said, there's no room in my life for you or you're howling. Let me undo these ropes and go on living without you, and not just change where we live.
Okay, excellent. So, along your journeys, you said in the summer you clear out of Dodge in Phoenix because it's too hot.
Yeah.
And you went around the U.S. staying in different places. What are some of the lessons you're learning about minimalism? What are some of the things, maybe the positive ones? Let's go with positive.
Okay, positive. I mean, you don't miss your stuff for sure. Like, I don't know. I feel like there certainly are inconveniences to living out of a van, especially one that doesn't have its own toilet and shower, just having to go out of your way to drive to the gym. But other than that, it's just, like, what do they say? More money, more problems, more stuff, more problems in terms of just like, having stuff to keep track of, to maintain, to deal with, to keep clean, that sort of thing. Like, I haven't missed it for the most part. So that's been a huge positive. Yeah.
Okay, so that's a big one, like not missing all of your stuff. And I was going to ask you, for books and things like that, do you go to the library and check out books, or are you more of an audiobook guy, or what? Or magazines? What do you do for entertainment in that realm?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I definitely check out books. I mean, I use the Libby and Hoopla library apps to do audiobooks quite often. I certainly do have a problem with accumulating books still, just like either from like used bookstores, little free libraries. I did seasonal work in Yellowstone for 2 months, and so that was an interesting experience. And also they had sort of an employee rec room with sort of like a group bookshelf, and I really struggled with that because they had all of these books that were sort of on like Eastern mysticism and philosophy and that sort of thing. And I definitely have a problem with accumulating books because they were just like free to take if you want one. And I just certainly have a problem with accumulating books faster than I can go through them. Similarly with clothes too, like I'm committed to try to avoid buying any new clothes, but of course there's more than enough stuff to find at thrift stores, and like just checking out a thrift store is just sort of a fun activity for me, but I can quickly accumulate way more clothes than I need. So try to be judicious about clearing out the stuff and keeping from it accumulating too much.
Wow, so it seems almost like a natural thing to like humans do, that we gather things.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I just accumulate books and clothes. I'm sort of outpacing myself a little bit of like I'm accumulating faster than I'm shedding them.
And in a van, you notice that right away. We're in a house,
right.
You may not.
Yeah.
Or an apartment.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can find places to hide them. There's whole industries devoted to finding cool shelves and bookshelves and storage. There's a place called the Container Store. Have you heard of this?
Of course. Yeah, the Container Store. Yeah.
If you haven't visited, it's the most... It's kind of like the most useful and unuseful store I've ever been in my life.
Right.
Because you could find something to like solve all of your woes of storing things, but at the same time it feels like a fetish being in there. Like, ooh, I can't wait to perfectly organize all of my cereals by color and plastic, and it's just really a strange place to hang out in.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. I guess I'm probably coming off like very pretentious and preachy right now because I feel like whenever I talk about minimalism and like not owning stuff and whatever, like people often can get pretty defensive of like, I like my stuff, you know, I have my collection of knickknacks and doodads and that kind of thing. So I guess just I should say for the record, that's another thing I've learned is like I'm not a better person for not owning stuff. I feel like I sort of like fantasized about like what if I just like got rid of all my stuff for years and then I finally did it, and that was a really fun and exciting moment in my life. You know, it was a fun experience, like giving all my stuff away. But also, like now that I'm on the other side of it, yeah, I'm still the same flawed person. I'm not like more enlightened or fitter, happier, more productive or anything.
You might. That was a Radiohead reference. Fitter, happier, more productive.
Exactly.
That sounds OK Computer. Is that my brain?
OK
is my brain
Computer.
Correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. I can't believe I picked that up. You snuck that in there. But I would say that perhaps you have become enlightened. Maybe not more enlightened than someone else, right? We don't want to compare ourselves to others too much, but. I think it's not a great idea to compare yourself to others because you are you and no one else can be you, and they can try. But I do think that you might be enlightened because clearly you are trying to live out your values, and you're symbolically but also logistically doing this.
Right.
It's a logistical chore that you've decided to give up some of your time to go to the gym, to shower and work out and all that,
right,
instead of having a bathroom. Mm-hmm. And cooking outdoors or cooking in a co-work space that you contribute to because you're contributing to this place,
right?
Is it maybe a little bit more time, but then I wonder, and this is kind of my questions about minimalism: does it free up your time to not be as stressed about certain things as you were when you had four walls?
Yeah, right. Because I felt a little bit caught off guard earlier when you asked that about you don't have a 9 to 5, so you have more time to pursue your career pursuits, right? So you said something like that, and I felt a little caught off guard because I'm like, I don't know if the answer is yes. I thought the answer would be yes, but I feel like I don't know. There's never enough time for anything, you know. I feel like I'm sort of like homeless and unemployed. Like theoretically, I should have all the time in the world, but I feel like I'm always busy. I'm always running around doing stuff. Again, like not to complain. I'm very grateful for that. Grateful to be busy and have like interesting things happening, I suppose. But yeah, I don't know. I think about this all the time. Like when I think about how busy I am just with random things going on. Like how do people with kids do it? You know.
Well, they don't sleep, Jef.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
I don't have kids, but I will speak for people I know that have kids.
Okay.
They don't seem to sleep.
Yeah.
They seem, and no offense to all my friends who have kids, but you really did age in the first 5 years of that kid's life. I noticed it. And you kind of looked like you had been on a war duty. And I mean, you look great, but let's face it, these kids need a lot of attention and time.
Right.
And then also like apartments are projects. Houses are bigger projects because in an apartment you don't own that, so the landlord ostensibly is supposed to be helping you with maintenance, although they don't always do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
Then you got to keep paying to make sure you don't get kicked out by the sheriff. Right. You don't want to be evicted.
Right.
And in a house, the bank really owns it unless you're wealthy, and I don't really know too many people that are actually wealthy.
Yeah.
So the bank owns your house, and they'll come take it from you if you don't make the payments, whatever the government has decided how many months you can go delinquent. But then the house is a living, breathing thing, just like the van. You got to take care of it. You got to.
Sure.
What if like some sort of bird burrows in your wall, or like something breaks your window, or you have a water leak, and things age, and so there's these projects, and everything takes time. But I think the interesting thing that you've said is like you're busy, but you are busy because you're creative. You're working on cool projects. You're meeting people, talking to people. I see that you're always going to these fun kind of like expressive events like the Phoenix bike rides and the art shows and the craft shows that I keep missing on Saturday because of my too busy of life of work to just be free. A lot of people. So what I'm trying to say is it's like you got to pick your pick your battles in terms of time, but I do think a lot of folks, what happens, kind of going off your accumulation, is you get a house or an apartment, and then you're like, okay, yeah, I want to get this thing, and then I need to get this thing, and I got to get this, I got to get a new car, and these might not even be people that are materialist. They just I guess I kind of need that. Right. Well, I guess I got to work more hours for that, or maybe make my company expand so I can make more revenue, or whatever, sell more trinkets or whatever it is. And you think, okay, but then when I get there, after that stuff, then you know what? I just need to take more time off. Maybe spend more time looking at birds outside. Maybe spend more time reading, less time, doom scrolling. But then what I find is that when most people get to that point, there's some other issue has come up.
Sure. Yeah.
Or their job needs more from them or something. I don't know what you're.
There's always like I'll relax later. Yeah. I'll finally get to that creative project or read that book or write that book or whatever at some future point. And of course, as we all need to learn at some point, like there is no later. You can only experience the now.
Right. You can only experience the now, and you found a way to adapt to the now in what I would say minimalism of space and minimalism of needing capital, which means minimizing your time, perhaps, strike me down if I'm wrong, minimizing your time doing things you don't love.
Yeah.
In terms of creative, you get to do more of what you like creatively. Would that be a good assessment?
Yeah, I feel less tied down, less obligation to like have a job or like have to just like work some menial tasks or whatever for just to be able to pay rent, I guess. Yeah, I have more flexibility with my relative financial freedom. Yeah.
Right, and you could, and like I knew that you did take a job this summer because it was seasonal, working on the national parks.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming, did you save up money from that? Is that what happened?
Yeah, which I mean, so I was in the employee housing for that as well, and that was like very menial labor. It was doing dishes in the back of the kitchen at Yellowstone, and so it was an interesting experience. It was humbling for sure. Like the first like handful of shifts, I was like, wow, it has been a long time since I've had kind of a shit job like this. I forgot how miserable it was. It felt like a real sort of Paris Hilton in the Simple Life moment for me. But it became, it's sort of cliche, but I feel like it sort of became a meditative thing for me where I was able to establish a flow of like, I'm grateful that just like I'm doing work in exchange for room and board and getting a little bit of money on top of that. Didn't make a ton of money. There's not a ton of money in dishes.
Right. Not a lot of money in dishes.
Yeah, exactly. But sort of, just be grateful that just all of my needs are met. All of my material needs, again, are cared for. And like, I have time to just like, because I'm living in Yellowstone National Park, like just go for hikes and explore and go camping and do all the fun natural nature stuff, experience the beauty of the natural world, and then contrast that with like the ugliness of dishes in the kitchen. Yeah.
Of whatever people left on their plates at the Yellowstone National Park cafeteria. That sounds a little bit ominous.
Exactly. Yeah.
I've worked in some kitchens. I try to avoid the dishwashing. I like to make the food. I didn't like to wash the dishes.
Yeah.
But I mean, you went a net positive. Mm-hmm. You had beautiful experiences.
Right.
I'm assuming you met people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
You read cool books. Mm-hmm. You got fed. You had housing that wasn't in a van. Your van was outside, parked somewhere.
Right.
And you got a little bit of money to throw in your bank account.
Yeah,
I mean, that's kind of a cool little vacation from being a freelance, is doing a little seasonal job like that.
Yeah, it was a cool experience. Yeah, another one of those things that like I was curious about wanting to try. So yeah, I'm glad that I went for it.
Okay, so this is we've got a little bit of time left.
Sure. Yeah.
So, because I feel like we're really into the minimalism thing. So, I do feel though, if you're going to become a minimalist and go on the road, you need to know how some things work in life. Like I'm curious. Like, you don't have to tell us where, but
sure.
do you receive U.S. postal mail for taxes and things?
I do. Yeah, I have sort of. That's another way that I feel very blessed to have like family that's pretty supportive of me. I would say,
Okay.
As much as they're not, they don't love that I'm, divorced and ex-Christian and that sort of thing. But again, they're very kind, very supportive. So yeah, I have like my parents who live in Minnesota, and then I have an uncle who lives here in Arizona. So I have sort of those two kind of home bases to receive mail for me and file taxes, that sort of thing. Which very grateful for that. That's a pretty common thing for, I'd say, like people who live out of their vehicles. If they do have that support of a friend or family member who can sort of be their default home address to use for filling out forms and receiving mail and that sort of thing. So again, very grateful that my family is supportive of me in that way.
But I know there's no one walking really through these dreams that I have. In the daylight I do all this work that needs to get done, and I leave the mind of night. I can't remember having crossed a threshold between the dust and the alive. So when a raven starts a conversation, I just stand there and blank out.
Love that. That's very cool. I was curious about that. And there's so many skills like, getting a gym membership, balancing a checkbook, being able to have some sort of freelance work. If you don't, because I'm sure there's people that I know there's people, I've met them that work in regular 9-to-5 jobs who do live out of their vehicles just to save money.
Sure.
But in your case, you're freelance, so you have projects. So let's just say, hey, Jef, you kicked butt on this project, you finished it, here's the check. Okay, now I'm curious. Let's just say you got a $1,500 check.
Yeah.
Okay. And you just finished this little freelance project, and maybe you got a couple coming up due dates, but let's say for 2 or 3 weeks you got no due dates. I'm curious, when you get that money and you realize, okay, I'm done. I don't really have to really work too hard on this for a little while.
Yeah.
Do you ever find yourself feeling like really free, or do you find yourself feeling scared? Whatever. I'm trying to or do you find yourself going, well, gee, I guess I can just go to whatever event I can go to around here. I don't have to plan my week out. I'm just curious how that is for you. What?
Yeah. I
threw out examples, but I don't know how to explain it exactly.
Yeah. I mean, so on the one hand, I feel, I don't know. Yeah. Again, feel very grateful and at peace to be sort of financially independent. My home is paid off, but of course my home is a van. It's not going to last forever. It's going to break down someday, so I'll need to buy another vehicle. So I feel, financially unburdened, I suppose you could say, by not having to pay rent. And just having a little bit more margin in my life in that way. And also just the freedom of schedule. I mean, the reason I just came back from Tucson today was because I last minute yesterday woke up and checked Instagram and saw that Mount Erie, one of my favorite bands, was playing in Tucson yesterday. They played last night.
I just missed that. I'm so sad.
Yeah. Oh, so I didn't know you were a fan. I should have told you.
No, it's okay. I've seen them twice, but I saw them on the Clear Moon tour. Was the last time I saw them in 2016 or 2015, I think.
Oh, anyway. That's awesome. Yeah.
So they were playing the new stuff.
They were playing the new stuff from Night Palace. Yeah.
I'm definitely gonna have to put Night Palace on the end of this podcast.
It was great. I don't know if you know the song Empty Paper Towel Roll. It's one of the songs on the new album. And anyway, so I brought a paper towel roll to hold up during that song. So Phil gave me a shout out when he said oh, you brought, he said this next song is about an empty paper towel roll. And I held it up. He's like, oh, you brought one. So I felt seen.
I've heard the album. I don't remember all the songs, but that's a fun little thing, and he's a great performer.
Yeah.
So that's a good example. So you went down to Tucson, and you got to see Mount Erie on a random Thursday night,
right?
Here in only in about an hour and 15 minutes away.
Yeah, exactly.
And if you had a 9-to-5.
Yeah,
you might have had to think twice about that coming back early on Friday or whatever.
Exactly. I could have maybe still swung it, but I would have been just like driving late at night to get back to work in the morning, that sort of thing. So I guess, yeah, that's a very recent example of me sort of enjoying my freedom. Because on one hand, I woke up and saw that. I was like, shoot, I wasn't planning on driving to Tucson today. That's kind of a hassle. But at the same time, it's like, this is what I got the van for, right? Just to have the freedom to be able to just change my plans last second and do fun things and experience life. So yeah, very grateful for that kind of freedom.
So with the bike rides, the art shows you do, different activities you're involved in the community, going to concerts, do you find yourself, I guess the word I would use is playing, like having fun, enjoying life, same, more or less than when you were like working the 9 to 5?
Yeah. That's a good question. I guess
maybe not enjoying life, but just like playing more, is it, like kind of spontaneously, I guess is what I'm kind of
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like the example I just said about the Mount Erie show for sure is a little bit more spontaneous. I mean, I think a lot of it also just has to do with just being an independent person where I'm just deciding for myself, like I can waste money on this show spontaneously as opposed to, being in a relationship where every financial decision is kind of a conversation and that sort of thing that I'm sure you're familiar with.
Yeah, I might be.
I don't know. I mean, even when I was like married and living in an apartment and everything, I've always like sort of had this sort of like, I don't know, immature or childlike illustration style and this sense of playfulness with like trying to not take myself too seriously. But yeah, I guess maybe you could say I'm doubling down on it a little bit more with like pretty early on in my van life experience. I started this project was drawing a nose every day. So that's why I have the nose sticker. I have a nose pin here.
That's amazing.
And sort of that started with the Inktober, because I used to do Inktober, which, are you familiar with that?
You like draw something every day or something?
Yeah, exactly. It's just like a drawing thing. Like every October, it's like an Instagram account that says like, here's your 31 prompts for the month, draw this every day. So I used to do that, and it was always very intimidated because everyone else's drawings look so much better than mine. So I decided I'm just going to make my own. I'm going to do Nose-tober, or just draw a nose every day. So there would be something that I felt like the pressure's off because it's just something that's very silly and not serious, but it's still challenging me to draw every day. And then originally I was only going to do it for a month, but then I just kept it going, and now it's become kind of this running bit kind of thing. So I guess that's an example of like play or silliness or just art for art's sake, that kind of thing.
Yeah, art for art's sake. And I know that you also, some of your more popular drawings you've made into T-shirts and things people can purchase.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, sure. JefCaine.com. Click on shop and go to my either Threadless or TeePublic store.
I'm just throwing that out there. I did purchase some Jef shirts. They've worked great.
Oh, hey, thanks for the support. Yeah.
I bought one of them too small, so my partner, she stole it and now she wears it. It's a cactus with an eye.
Oh, okay. Cool.
She loved that one.
Change your way of limping around the world, 'cause you know what will come soon, a real broken leg, and you know this will come true, you cannot get away. Daylight, dawn, and evening around the world, and you know what will come to. Do I have to say everybody will eat you?
Yeah, so I was just contemplating, you've got a pretty good setup right now.
Yeah.
You know that like a shellfish or whatever, your van will eventually break. You will have to get a new van to kind of continue this version of minimalism.
Yeah.
More on van life. I think AI art sucks, so I think hopefully artists will always be needed that can make different things and create creative things for people. So there's jobs there, and you're in your where your main skill that you like to express yourself is. But I'm curious. Have you contemplated that you might continue to be a van lifer for life, or have you thought like, well, maybe I'll get bored someday and move into a house or something? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I have thought about it a lot. I don't have a super clear picture of what my long-term plans are. As I said before, for sure. On one hand, I feel like I'm living good, or I'm financially secure because my home is paid off. On the other hand, it's like, of course, like it will eventually break down and I'll need to replace it. So it's not like I can just like coast off of that forever. And also, for sure, I'm open to the idea that at some point I might either like find like a steady job somewhere that I really enjoy and just want to live somewhere year round, and then it would make more sense to have a home or an apartment or whatever. I'm certainly open to that idea. I feel like I've enjoyed van life so far, but I don't feel stubborn about it. Like in the sense of I feel like if circumstances change and it makes sense for me to have a house or apartment or a different living situation, I feel like I can still go back and be like, oh yeah, I used to have this van life. And, I'll probably be nostalgic for it and be like, shoot, why did I give up that lifestyle? But I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, that does answer my question. Just kind of like open to it, and right now it makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense for now. Of like, but yeah, I feel good about like not having to pay rent to live in an apartment in Phoenix. For the
it's very expensive to rent here. I hate to tell you, everyone out there. Used to be very cheap actually when I first moved here.
The AI art is another thing. You kind of open another can of worms there, but okay. Yeah, I mean for sure that's something I've certainly have had anxiety about that for a couple of years now. This idea that, I agree with you that like AI art, like it's still sort of at a place where people can tell, people certainly have like a distaste for it. And there's a lot of people who are very vocal about like, we need to support real human artists, which I'm very grateful for. At the same time, I do feel I do despair quite a bit about the prospects of, maybe I realistically don't have a future in digital art. At least it's more and more just going to become so much easier for the clients who would hire a human to just do it all themselves. And on one hand, like it's kind of cool and exciting. On the other hand, it's not great for me in terms of job security. Something I've trying to just like focus more on is physical art. Like you mentioned, the photo booth where my girlfriend and I have been running that together at farmers markets and stuff like that, because she's an artist as well, and where we do a thing where we like live draw people's portraits and it spits it out like a photo booth, but it's a drawing rather than like a little Polaroid picture. Anyway, so things like that. Murals is something I have a little bit of experience in and wanting to do more of, like things like where it's tangible, like hand-drawn on a physical object is something that computers can't replicate as easily as just digital art, which, of course, as we all know, computers can spit out instantly for free at this point. So that's a way I'm trying to be strategic about pivoting my career and coping with the whole AI takeover. But yeah, it is something I have less job security because of the existence of AI art.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. There was a band, I think it was The Cure.
Okay.
The Cure that put out their new album this year, that the art was AI.
Is The Cure still around? I don't know.
Oh, The Cure is around. Yeah,
oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay,
They're just older now.
Still, yeah.
And every one of their fans was so mad. Yeah. And then they were like, "Well, we were really trying to just make a statement."
Yeah.
And I was like, "That's not the right way. That was a bad excuse, bro." But I feel like AI. Yeah, it's a whole thing. I can't even get it. That's a whole another topic.
Yeah, it is.
But because there's so many implications, so unknown, and it's what a mess. In terms of the minimalism, has it in any way influenced kind of the friends you've made, or as opposed to when you were married and living in an apartment and doing different stuff like that?
Yeah, a little bit. And in some ways I have like still some of the same friends of, I still have like old friends from Minnesota. I have friends who were like used to be my coworkers when I worked at a church years ago, and like friends from like the bike group in Phoenix. So in that sense, it's like, you still can maintain your old friendships. And of course I've met other people like in Yellowstone or like sort of fellow travelers. Like I've gone to a couple of different meetups. Like this past year I went to the Rubber Tramp Rendezvous, which I don't know if you're familiar with that, just like a big like meetup in Quartzsite, Arizona. If you've seen the movie Nomadland, that's featured there, where it's like people who are living out of their cars and they all just like meet up, and there's sort of like seminars and like work trade programs and whatever, that sort of thing. Yeah, so I guess I've met some new people. I've had some new experiences like this past, like last summer. I had the opportunity to just go and stay with a friend in Vancouver, Canada, because he was traveling for like a month. So he said, hey, you should just come and like stay in my apartment in downtown Vancouver for a month. And so that was a really awesome experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I got to meet him, and then, just like met like other friends in my time when I was staying there. So of course, travel creates new opportunities to build new friendships, meet interesting people.
Excellent. Yeah, and I'm curious, has anyone maybe in your friend group or in your circle kind of disapprove of this minimalism that you're embarking on? You don't have to name names.
Yeah.
I'm curious.
Not that I'm aware of. Yeah, it's certainly possible that people secretly disapprove and they're just like polite around me, but then they talk behind my back. Yeah, that's possible. I don't know. I think I guess I have a lot of conversations with my parents where it seems like they're supportive, like I said, which I really appreciate, like by taking mail for me, and of course like my dad like helped me with like working on the van and that sort of thing because he's good with working on cars. But at the same time, like, yeah, I do get the sense just based on the conversations we have that they're sort of pulling for like, okay, like, you're having your adventure now, but when are you going to kind of settle down and, like get married again, get a house, like a house is a great investment. You don't want to be living in a van when you're old. I've gotten those kinds of comments from family members for sure. And again, like I don't want to just like be totally dismissive of it. Like I think they make some valid points. Also sometimes I just feel like, I don't know, I feel like I've already done that. Like I'm sort of living my life backwards, where I already had that life where I was settled down and had a home and had a job and that sort of thing. And I found that to be like not fully fulfilling for me. And now I'm doing something else. And of course, like there's always going to be a lack of fulfillment in some aspects of life, at least for me. Like I felt unfulfilled in the house. I feel unfulfilled in the van, but at least I know that owning a home is not going to solve all my problems for me.
That's a very good point. Yeah, I mean, I do think that part of the human condition is unfulfillment.
Yeah.
And the negative bias, we're way more likely to remember something negative that happens or we perceive as negative than we are something positive. The brain studies, which I'm quoting, are it takes about half or less than half a second to remember something negative that happens that you perceive as negative.
Right.
And it takes a full 25 to 30 seconds to encode the same level of memory of something that you would see as positive. And in fact, it almost takes intentional effort.
Yeah, absolutely. Right.
And so, that's to keep us alive, of course, but it really is a strange thing when you have so many options versus, let's say, a couple thousand years ago, maybe you're in a nomadic tribe and you're like, well, which way should we go? I don't know. Which way is the water? Which way is the harvest? Which way, where do we find food? That's important. Where do we sleep? Okay. The cave people lived in caves. They called them cavemen, but it was, if you look at all the caves in Europe and all over, people lived in caves or little dwellings, and then they would go out and your options are more limited. Now it's like in this weird, whatever, hyper-capitalist, strange place we're living in right now, you have so many options to create your life, but yet most people are striving towards, I want a house, because that feels safe and secure to have something like that.
Right.
And to do that, I need to sacrifice this many hours to this job or this sort of activity to gain the money to get a loan from the bank for that so that I can feel better about that. But if I stop working, I'm in trouble. So I have to get insurance, and I got to pay for the insurance.
Yeah.
And then it's sort of safer to have a partner potentially in some, at least financially it is, maybe not emotionally or sexually, but definitely financially. So then I have pressure to maybe hang out with somebody, it's in the U.S. at least, there's not exactly as many collectives, as there maybe once were. But so there's sort of some pressure to do what other people are doing. And yet at the same time, you look at aging adults in the U.S., and I've read a bunch of books on dementia and Alzheimer's, and just how much of that is actually caused by lifestyle and not as much on the genetics.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I haven't heard that.
Well, it's not as popular, but I'm talking about Johns Hopkins scientists that I've interviewed. So those are different podcasts you can look up. But one was called American Dementia, one of the ones I did. But thinking about how, then life is more about making your safe place and less about an adventure, right?
Right.
Quote unquote safe place in the house.
Yeah, for sure.
So then when older folks, because you were talking about your parents, like when you're older, you don't want to be living in a van. That's like, I'm not really sure that, because if people evolved outside and lived in shelter for, little shelters, but were gone most of the day, living in a van is kind of like living in a cave.
Sure.
And then you're just going around being outdoors as much as possible, gathering food and supplies.
Yeah.
That's actually good for your body in a way, to keep it active and problem solving constantly.
Absolutely. Yeah. Another thing about the sort of like long-term plans into old age is that was something that was sort of striking to me at the Rubber Tramp Rendezvous. Was, again, very, very true to both the book and the movie Nomadland. A lot of the people there were much older than me. A lot of people were in their 60s plus. And it was sort of that classic story of people who just turned to van life because they didn't have enough saved for retirement, or they didn't, their employer screwed them over, or whatever their story was. Everyone has a unique story of why they chose this life. But for a lot of people, it was sort of out of just financial necessity, not being able to afford to keep their home, or this was their retirement plan if they sold their house and are now using the money to just travel because they've always wanted to. So just, that to say one point for living in a van into old age.
Well, right. And a lot of some of the cognitive decline comes from people, they aren't challenging themselves either through physical exercise or mental exercise. And when your life is so serene, like I don't know many people these days that have their house paid off, but let's just say my grandparents did. Right? Because money was different back then. Yeah. And they paid off their house. And then it's like, I don't know, what are we going to do now? We've enough money in the bank and food. Sure. Right? So one of the things is, older folks do crosswords and Sudoku and watch Jeopardy and things like that. Sure. But there's you almost like have to force yourself to go do physical exercise and force yourself to problem solve. Whereas in the van, I'm not trying to tell everyone to live in a van. I'm just saying, right? Because there's dangers too. Like somebody could hit your van, that would suck, right? Yeah. Or like you could, get a flat tire or whatever. There's challenges, but by living in a van, you're sort of making your life a little bit more like the ancient people in a way, where you kind of have to forage and be on your feet and moving around, and you're not just you could be sedentary by going to the library, but you have the option. You're kind of forced to be on your feet because you can't stand in the van.
You can't stay in, one place for too long, for sure. Yeah.
Eventually, by the same thing I once came from, I too am a chunk broken off.
What would your advice be to people out there that are a little disenfranchised with the status quo, that are thinking about, well, if Jef can pull off van life, maybe I'll pull off van life. Maybe I'll become a minimalist. What are some key pieces of advice for folks out there?
Oh, no. Don't take any advice from me. Don't be like me, kids.
Don't be like me.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know. I mean,
What if their soul, what if they tune into this Okay, if you just tune into this podcast by accident, don't follow anything Jef said.
Yeah.
But if you saw the title, I don't know what it's going to be, but if you saw the title and it attracted you because you're contemplating, living a little bit off the natural status quo, what would your advice be for people that are already contemplating?
Yeah, I do worry about this because sometimes when I tell people about my lifestyle and stuff, they tell me that they're jealous of me, and it's like sometimes it's people who like have families, and so I would say, of course, like that, because that of course is a huge part of my story, the fact that I was getting divorced, and so I just jumped into this new opportunity of van life. So I say, like, yeah, if you're, if you have a family, please do not like leave your family to
that
go.
Would not be nice.
To van life. That's bad advice. Yeah, I mean, but if you have the option, if you're already like single or just financially independent, or if you're looking to like get a new apartment because your rent is too high, if I, like you said, if I can do it, you can do it. Like maybe this is a way that you could just like save money, even if it's just for a short amount of time. Like, yeah, there's no shame in living out of your vehicle and sort of living on the fringes to get by. You get rid of your stuff, you won't miss it, like I said before.
Yeah, so the psychological and stress benefits seem to be some of the largest I've heard of getting rid of stuff and kind of minimizing your life and simplifying. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, sure. It's psychological and stress. Sure, yeah.
Right. So there was something I saw on the internet where there was an old Chris Farley sketch from Saturday Night Live about 92.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Where he was being a motivational speaker and telling kids not to live in a van down by the river.
Right.
And it was supposed to scare the kids. And it was funny because somebody had juxtaposed that with like some sort of, I guess there's a trend online of people really wanting those Sprinter vans.
Sure,
and the fantasy of like being a tech guy off grid or tech gal, whatever, tech person, and being able to like kind of like pocket your entire salary while
exactly.
like, cooking trout at a national park using the Wi-Fi, like that sort of fantasy. And they were like, really? So the joke was they're really excited about living in a van down by the river. Things have changed. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I've seen that meme as well. I had the idea like back in the 90s, like that was a disaster scenario, living in a van down by the river. Now it's the dream because, of course, no one can afford to buy a house anymore. Yeah.
It is quite costly to buy a home. That's a whole nother podcast, but you can read about why real estate is the way it is by just Googling, different articles and stories on that. And the mainstream media has got their take, but there's a lot of other takes as well. So just keep researching. And, I love the idea that you also said, like, if your apartment rent's getting too high and, like, you're in a really bad shape, like, maybe, do it for a year. See what you think, right?
Yeah.
The hard part is, if you don't want to part with your stuff, because you said you're not going to miss it. I also thought you could do a trial where you put all your stuff in a storage bin if you don't really want it.
Right.
I mean, you could just leave it there and they can auction it.
Exactly.
Or whatever, or sell it. I don't know.
Yeah. Store stuff with family, for sure. Yeah.
So I thank you, Jef, for telling us your story. I do find it's funny that people are saying they're jealous of you because I'm like, we all have choices, right? Like, there's a part of me that's like, I want to, instead of being jealous, I want to take the idea of you simplifying your life and go, how would I, Paul Krauss, simplify my life in a way?
Yeah.
And see if I see a benefit. Jef just really didn't do it in small doses. He went right into the deep end of the pool.
Yeah.
And so I do think there's also a gradient where you can start simplifying your life and saying, okay, well, I'm in too big of a house. I'm going to get a smaller house, or I'm going to get to a smaller apartment, or I'm going to get a cheaper car, or I'm going to use public transportation, or I'm going to ride my bike. There's many ways to become a minimalist that don't involve, ending a relationship and buying a van.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But I mean, this is your life, and I appreciate you sharing it. So if you want to support Jef's journey, he sells actual art, stickers, all sorts of stuff.
All human made, stickers, T-shirts, that sort of thing. Again, jefcaine.com is my website, so that's like my portfolio. So I'm a freelance graphic designer, illustrator, so open for commissions or whatever if you want to hire me. You can buy t-shirts and whatever. Yeah, I'd sell stickers at like farmers markets and stuff sometimes, and do the live portraits with the photo booth thing. So if you see me in real life, you can buy stuff from me there if you so choose.
Follow him on social media.
Follow
and
me
you
on
can see
social
where
media.
the photo booth is going to be next.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, Jef, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
No wonder I feel so tired of talking. There's so much to take in.
Co-Hoots is the best because why are they so good?
Because they're not just about co-working, they're about co-community.
Oh, nice. I would like that with my Coca-Cola. Later.
Yeah, you got it.
Oh, that was so bad.
Co-worker.
I'm kicked out. Okay.
It feels so friendly when you say hello. No wonder I want to wrap you up and take you home. I'm looking forward to the change.
And there you have it. This has been another episode of the Intentional Clinician podcast. If you are enjoying the show, please leave us a rating on iTunes or share the show with people you know. I would surely appreciate it. As some of you know, I am passionate about preventing future violence in the United States. I have started a nonprofit with colleagues called the National Violence Prevention Hotline, which is a 501c3 organization. We are endeavoring to gain funding and collaborators and volunteers so that we can start a 24/7 hotline and chat line to reach potential perpetrators before they may act violently. It is a bold effort to curb violence and save innocent lives by working to connect with potential offenders while they are in the planning stages of violence, help to de-escalate them, and provide resources so that they can get appropriate professional help. The National Violence Prevention Hotline is looking to open up a conversation about violence in society, the causes, and the solutions. You can learn more by visiting our website at violencepreventionhotline.org. You can get involved by writing your congressperson from our website, sharing it with your network, or even donating to the cause. If you are looking for an EMDR International Association consultant, I am a consultant and I can help provide 20 hours that you need to become EMDRIA certified. Just check out the show notes and send me a message and see if we're a good fit to work together. If you are in need of counseling, do not hesitate to make an appointment with a local counselor in your area. You can also make an appointment with the excellent clinicians at Health for Life Counseling in Grand Rapids as part of the Trauma Informed Counseling Center of Grand Rapids by visiting www.healthforlifegr.com. And if you are in the state of Michigan, you can also schedule a telehealth appointment. The recording you just listened to consists of the personal opinions of Paul Krauss and his guest, and while these are based upon the literature they have read and the experience in their respective fields, the information on this podcast should not be viewed or thought of as the definitive opinion on any subject. Listening to this podcast is not a substitute for treatment. If you're in a crisis, please call 911 or the National Crisis Line at 988. Support your local bookstore by shopping at bookshop.org. That's www.bookshop.org. It donates a percentage of sales to local bookstores all across the United States, which I think gives character to our cities and a place to hang out and a place to explore. You can order from the comfort of your own home online while supporting businesses near you. If you are a therapist and you are not involved in your local counseling or therapist or social work organization, please get involved to at least pay dues so that we can have lobbyists help keep mental health care accessible at the government level, and also expanding into schools and other places that need it. And also, if you didn't know, counseling organizations and professional organizations are working to keep us from becoming gig workers for a lot of large corporations who are coming in and trying to buy up local counseling agencies or basically pay you what they pay for people to deliver food to your house. So, get involved. Until next time on The Intentional Clinician, I wish you all a safe and peaceful week.
And caverns, blue skies glow throughout the darkness.